Welcome back, everyone, to the Authentic as Fuck podcast. My name is Sun. I teach marketing and storytelling. And in this podcast, I interview entrepreneurs and creators about their story, their life journey that made them the person they are today, why they do what they do today, and how they do it. Today, we have Adeyemi. Adeyemi has spent 11 years exploring the realms of spirituality, quantum physics, plant medicine, and energy. With background in mechanical engineering and business, he moved from a successful career to embark on a profound quest for spiritual understanding. His powerful healing journey led him to develop his own energetic formula to empower both himself and his clients in unlocking their full potential and experiencing radical transformation. More recently, after hosting 30 plus psychedelic experiences with clients, he launched this new membership program, Other Side, a private and invite-only space for accomplished men on their own journey of transformation. Other Side will guide them to unlock and master their spiritual and emotional selves using his own proven and highly effective transformation formula. Welcome, Adeyemi.
Thank you for having me, Sunny. Excited to be here. I've seen you many different times, and it's very good to be doing this together.
Yeah, it's so great to connect with you. So yeah, let's just dive right in.
Let's do it.
Or let's quickly start by where you started from, your upbringing. What was your childhood like? Yeah, can you kind of?
I was born in
take
Nigeria.
us through that?
So currently I'm in the UK. I've lived in the States and lived in probably 12 different countries. But I was born in Nigeria, and I was born to a military home. My father was a military man and really had this discipline and this discipline edge to him, right? So grew up in that household. There was a lot of rigidity in the house that I grew up with on how you needed to do things, when you needed to do it by, and how you needed to show up in the world, right? And of course, if you know anything about a child growing up, this leads to many different programming down the road, and I'm sure we can get into that. But my upbringing is really Nigeria. And then from there, I traveled across the world and explored, shall we say.
At what age did you start traveling?
I left home at 15. I actually left home alone at 15 and went to the States. Funny enough, I was lucky because I went into university probably 3 years earlier than most people went into university. So everyone goes to uni in the States, I believe, 18, 19. I got in at 15, right? And that's kind of how my brain was working with math and just really being super quick. And people don't realize this, but a lot of people from Nigeria, I think even if you look at the statistics, some of the smartest college graduates in the US are typically from Nigeria and African origin, because there's a lot more rigor in our study criteria.
Oh yeah, so you think that has to do with with that the discipline, the like you said, rigor, and because I
So
kind of noticed that in Korea too. Like in Korea,
yes,
the standards for math is a lot higher than here.
specifically, right? Because when I went to school at 15, right, and I saw people who were 19, 20 in university, they were doing math that I did 1 to 2 years earlier.
Hmm.
Right? So there was this advanced way of thinking about, like, we're doing cosines and tan equations that, yeah, I was a year ahead of everybody at least. So there is
Yeah,
this
so
thing, and I guess it's just the African thing, right? And also it's, I guess, in Korea, there is rigor. You push hard.
okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. Growing up, like the first 15 years of your life, like that.
Mm.
So I have some questions.
Let's
So
go.
what was that like? That first 15 years, like growing up in that very like rigorous, disciplined lifestyle, and then what made you at age 15 like go like, oh, I'm just gonna go abroad like that? Because that's not an easy decision for a 15-year-old either, like to go alone.
Yes, but my father was a captain in the army, super strong, powerful man. That rubbed off on me, right? So a lot of the drive I have in life that allows me, I can walk into any country, any new place, don't have to know anybody. I'm going to conquer it, right? There is that energy. But, and this very much ties into a lot of the stuff that I focus my life on now. Growing up in Nigeria, because of having such a father who was so strong, right? When he comes into a room, you automatically reduce your voice
Hmm.
because he's so present, he's so big, he's so accomplished. And that takes away your voice. And for me as a child, it programmed this core feeling of I don't belong and I need to prove myself.
Mhm.
right? And I'm sure we'll touch on this later on. That became my core driving force in life of not belonging, needing to prove myself. But also in Nigeria, I went through things like sexual abuse, right? Where I had a rigorous father, but then there were situations that happened when I started exploring my sexuality that led into sexual abuse growing up.
Mhm.
So you have this really interesting, almost like a dichotomy of processes and things that happened to me. I came from a loving family. As much as my father is super hard, he's also super loving. It's just the way he conveys that love. It's a little bit stronger
Tough
than most,
love.
right? It's rigid love. Let's put it that way. And I hope we get into this later on because now the relationship I have with him is super beautiful. But it did start with this core thing of I don't belong, I don't fit. I need to go figure out myself. I need to prove myself. And also, you just have to realize that there are no opportunities in Nigeria. So if you have the
Mm.
opportunity to leave, and my parents ended up having cash and I was able to leave, amazing, go do that. Unfortunately, the cash ran out. We went broke, and I ended up a cleaner in Germany cleaning floors. That's a story for another time. So, anyway, what made me want to leave was just this core drive to go do more and show up in the world.
So when you and then when you came to the States at 15 and seeing kind of like how Americans are, was there any kind of so when you were in university, like up until that time, what are some of the uh, things that you learned, like from what like the culture difference and everything, right? Like what are some of the biggest lessons you learned during that period?
I've had an unlearning since then. When I came in, the biggest shock I faced was just how free and loose everyone was in America, right? And also how much people took for granted the opportunity they had. There wasn't a rigidity, there wasn't a focused effort towards life. There wasn't this chip on your shoulder, I can do it mentality in the American colleges I went to. People were just kind of gallivanting, playing around with it. Whereas I came with this intensity. Like I'll message my mom and she would say, keep going, no limits. That's kind of the conversation we have, and it's the constant text. So you have this constant pressure to conquer, to deliver, which I didn't find with the Americans. And also there was super loose around sex, super loose about how they showed up. Their values was completely alien to me. In Nigeria, where you couldn't even have tattoos in my family, right?
Mm-mm.
That's not an option. So you had a big gap in terms of freedom and how people showed up towards their life and the belief they had in themselves. I noticed that it felt like, and this is not to be egocentric, I had a lot more belief of I can do, whereas a lot of the Americans I were around kind of had this complacency about them, which was beautiful in its own way.
And what how did you feel about that? Like how did that affect you? Like did it did it change the way you think at all, or you know?
After going on my journey now, right, and my own journey of transformation, I had to unlearn some of those core principles of discipline and being hard. When I was in the US, that helped me and that propelled me forward because I could see someone and know, right, I'm going to gap you. I have an
Mhm.
opportunity to gap you. I can see where there is space for me, right? So there was this inherent urgency. I remember I was part of a fraternity at one point and I walked out of the fraternity. I was like, guys, I'm not going to play around with you and gallivant when your fathers are uncles, are the CEOs of Comcast and blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
Fuck off. I'm gone, right? Because there was this inherent, let's smoke weed, let's play, let's just have fun and just bounce through school. I didn't have that opportunity. I had a visa I needed to get when I graduated
Mm.
university. I needed all A's for that visa. So it was this urgency to push and to drive, and also just not to waste the time of your life, right? It was time is precious. And that motivated me to create a gap to most people. So I guess I was kind of aggressive.
Yeah. Oh, actually, okay. So you it sounds like you had very different values than most of the students, like let's say because like a typical American students, right? Like get wasted, smoke weed, part like so they're not thinking about like their future and like this like they're not thinking about that, right?
Yeah.
So there is like you said there is a gap between, and so was that difficult for you, like because like for me, if I was like that, if I was in your situation and I see that everyone is like that, I would kind of feel like out of place, or like I lack a better word, like I would feel like a loner because like
Yes.
I'm the one who's like studying and doing all of these things while they're just out partying. You know what I mean?
This was the thing, right? This was, if I even trace back, this is what I mean by the few source. This is what I mean by this core pain that I was feeling also when I was in the States, where it was like, do I really belong here? I was part of a
Mm.
fraternity, the most popular fraternity in the university, right? And we had this where I think we are getting to finals at one point, and my friends, actually, they were funny enough, they were Nigerian also, just a different kind. They were just partying and getting wasted. And it annoyed me so much because I did that for a while until I started to see my grades decline.
Mm.
And when my grades declined, I went from getting all A's to getting F's. And it was frustrating until I decided at one point to just cut off the fraternity. At one point, I got so mad at them for partying, I kicked the door down, right? And we got into this super heat. I am like that. When I want something and I'm moving forward, I'm moving forward. But also, at this point in my life, my family was going broke. My parents were paying they're paying like $7,000 a month for me to go to university. I went to Syracuse University. Yearly fees is
Oh,
70 something thousand dollars. We had three children or two children in school as a family. My brother was in England. He was getting paid, I believe, $50,000 a year for his tuition alone. Mine was 70 something thousand dollars. Add both of them up, you have a family in Africa that's churning out 10 to 12 grand without really even considering food and accommodation for the child, right? So if you really layer that on, and we had my third brother was meant to go to university, there was this inherent, as a family, my parents were doing all they could for us while the economy crashed, and it crashed to the point where the valuation went down by half. And in
mm.
fact, when I left Nigeria many years ago, don't need to get there, when I left Nigeria and actually started traveling, the exchange rate was 130 naira to $1. Now it's almost 1,000. It's not actually 1,400, 500. So you have this 10x devaluation going on. And while this was happening, I had this pressure, and I'll speak to my parents knowing that I'm wasting their money. And at a certain point, that guilt gets up to you,
Mm, mm,
right?
mm.
So, yes, I felt deeply alienated. I also couldn't show up because now we were constricted money wise. So there was this inherent pain looking around going, I don't fit in anymore. I need to go hustle. The rich people I was hanging around before, now I have to go be a security guard within the company to hold space for my family, right? So I was going through all of this, and still I found that a lot of people wanted to party and invite me. To a point I just had to make a cut. And that's when I kicked the
Mm.
door down, went into this heated battle, broke out from the fraternity completely, and went my own way. And if I hadn't gone my own way, I wouldn't be where I am today. Because you need those moments where you decide that against all odds, I'm happy to separate myself if it's the determining factor between me and success. I choose that all the time. And I have
Yeah.
to anchor this by making that decision and saying, fuck this, I'm out. The class, I think it was differential equations, 30-year engineering. The class that I got an F in, the next year I got 109 over 100. So sometimes it's not your capabilities. Oftentimes it's your surroundings and your
Mm.
ability to make the decision to commit to the path you're going on. And when I made that decision, I like to say burn all boats. Because when you burn all boats, you have no fucking options. When you have no fucking
Mm.
options, now you have to go decide and go make things happen. My A started from there. Unfortunately, I
I
didn't
love that.
finish university, right? Because we didn't have money in the end. But that gave me this encoding that I fucking can. And when there was no way, I think your audience might love this. At one point, there was no way I was going to fail all classes. I can't fail all classes. I escalated to the dean and to the chancellor of the university and petitioned a special case where I ended up getting preferential treatment. They didn't count any of the grades for that semester, completely wrote it off, and allowed me to take it the next semester. And all my grades got wiped off. So there was no trace of this. So there was this element of campaign for yourself, fight against what you don't want, and fucking show up.
Hmm.
Fucking show up.
I
So thank
also
you for taking me there. It's been a while I went there.
I also, so it sounds like you learned a huge valuable lesson then, because number one, you learned how much impact an environment can have, like the environment around you, and also like uh, I feel like you're the first 15 years of your life, that discipline actually probably helped you, because that's the reason why you realize that this is not it, right? When you start to fail, because like most kids at that age is like, oh, whatever, like they're like, oh, I failed, but like they don't have like the mind to be like, okay, I need to get myself out of here, right? Like,
This was my dad's influence, right? And there are many negatives that came from growing up there, but a hell of a lot of positives. I was a little bit older at this point, but one of the things from my father is you can stand on your own. And there's really a chip on the shoulder of the last name. And we say it as a family. It's like, do you know your last name? Like, do you really know your last name? And it's kind of a running joke that we have, but you have to be able to stand on your own. And I love this concept because what it's come in now, when we start to get into even authenticity, which is the name of your podcast, you can't be authentic if you're not really separate. Because to be authentic is to identify your unique nature and express your unique nature. The only way you can be unique is to be separate. So
mhm,
to affirm yourself is to separate yourself from everyone else. To affirm others, right, and to just follow others is to separate yourself from yourself. So the closer you get to your core being, when you really get into your uniqueness, your story, and all of these things, is the more separate you are from people. And this is the edge you're looking for. So yes, my father played a huge role, and I had to execute on that role.
yeah, no, I think it's a big, because I think most people, at least in the United States, at if they were in that place where like it seems like the world is against you, right? All these rich kids are
Yeah,
like they're not worried about life,
yeah,
and at that moment, most people would go into like a resentment, right? It's like me against the world, that type. But you've actually took responsibility and said, I'm not gonna let the world do this to me. I'm gonna get myself out of here, change my situation. And even if you had to work as a security guard or something, like, because most people wouldn't have the humility to do that, right?
thank you. But I really think that, when you have that option of separating yourself from the world, don't fear those moments because those are the moments where you're being introduced to your potential, right? Because of my work in quantum and and I've been spiritual since like 7 years old, right? So I started reading about a lot of this stuff very early on. You realize
Oh,
that those moments I started, my father was also pretty much into this, right? So my whole life I've been in this just a slightly different thinking. I stopped watching cartoons at 7 years old. So this whole thing is when you're in those moments, life is giving you an opportunity to separate yourself from the rest of the world. You take those moments of separation because that's a moment where you're being introduced into your potential as a human being. Most people
mhm,
run from that. That's when you step in. That's a ladder of life
mhm.
for you.
It's so interesting that, okay, so you're one of the few people that I know that started this journey early, because like most people kind of stumble into that like later in life, right? As an adult,
Yes,
like they get into spirituality. So how does a 7-year old? Because like when I was 7 years old, like my parents had to force me to go to church, and when I go to church, like I like you talk to me about spirituality and things like that as a
yeah,
7-year old. I'm just gonna be like, whatever, right? Like I just went to church to hang out with friends. So
understood.
how did that happen? Like as a 7-year old, what was that like? Like kind of learning these stuff.
I started having dreams early on. Again, my mom and father pretty spiritual, right? My mom, she's like one of those people who like super woo woo dreams, goes to church, does a lot of that stuff. And I no longer go to church for several reasons. Growing up, we were in church. I stopped watching cartoons at about 7 years old. Something in me just wanted to connect to Discovery Channel and National Geographic and learn about the world. I had this inner curiosity, right? And the spiritual angle started to catch on. I would say we're getting closer to 10. By the way, I started driving at about 8 years old. We don't need to get into my age, but I started driving at about 8 years old. I'm like the Nigerian Indiana Jones. Anyway, so at about 10, my father had a lot of spiritual books, still has them. And he started handing me some of them, like books like Three Magic Words by U.S. Anderson. And I remember reading it, and it was talking about, it had a paragraph that was like, this is how to meditate. I was like, how do you read a book and close your eyes at the same time, right? That's kind of the dilemma I was going through. And I also started getting introduced into conspiracy theories. And conspiracy theories, when I started reading them, they just resonated with me. So I went down the rabbit hole. Plus, one thing I didn't mention here is my father was part of the upper echelons of Nigeria at a certain point. So he got
Mhm.
to see the hidden hand behind government and how those things work,
Mhm.
right? And add that on with his spiritual knowledge, all of a sudden you're getting this direct download from a super mature man, right? Who just gives you this, he holds space, he talks about with his friend. It caught my attention. I couldn't stop. It's one of those things that kept dragging me. And over the years, I kept aligning more and more into that and wrapping my head around this field. And I guess it's added correctly for me because I have the science and the spiritual now, and I can see how things really fit.
Were other kids when okay? So I want to go back to your childhood.
Please.
Were other kids in Nigeria around that time your peers? Were you? Would you say were you different from? Because like one of the things I noticed, I actually met a lot of people from Nigeria. We have a huge community. Like in our community, there's like a huge community of people from Nigeria.
Yeah.
And one of the things I noticed about Nigerians is that they're a lot more mature than their age. Is that so? Do you think that was part of that, or do you think were you still kind of different from other kids
It's
in that?
both. I did have, and I need to really check my ego speaking. I did have difference from other kids. I was weird, right?
Okay.
Even till today, like they're okay. I was fun. I had connections with different people, but a lot of the things I wanted to speak about, other people didn't want to speak about it. In fact, this was one of the trauma points I went through when I want to ask my mom something, and she's like, "Again, like, what is this concept you're bringing, my friend?" You know, and that does something to a child when your mom says that. But if you want to go into why Nigerians are mature, let's look at the culture. People don't realize this, but before they had street lights in London, they had street lights in my city called Benin City, Nigeria. There's an inherent age encoded in the DNA of Africans. A, because it's source DNA. And if you start looking at epigenetics where genes can write on themselves, you realize that even if you remove the last 200 years, there's still an encoded inherent age within these DNAs. And when you give it the right space to bloom and blossom, it can resonate at a very different frequency. That's why if you give a Nigerian the ability to connect into math and all of, there's a spark there. Not for everybody, of course. I've seen some which like it's not a thing, but there's the total spark there. So I believe it's inherent in the culture, which is encoded in the DNA. I'm lucky to have a family that's well read. My dad speaks what 7 languages, traveled, and blah blah blah. And I have a never-ending quest for knowledge. So you start adding these things up, and all of a sudden your rate of growth is just massive. And also, I'm a 6'3", 6'4" man. I'm big. I'm not scared of trying new things. It's hard to intimidate me. So I've also been on my own journey. And when you start adding all of these things up, your acceleration and your separation curve just really steepens, right?
Yeah.
Versus say if I was smaller and I didn't travel as much, I would just have a similar mindset. But I've lived in Germany, learned languages, done different things. So it's inherent in culture. Also remember how old Africa is and the nurture of my family because they gave me that space.
Yeah. Do would you do you consider yourself introvert or extrovert?
Are you familiar with human design?
Yeah. I mean, like I'm very lightly familiar.
Understood. So I have a role model nature, which is my natural ability to share wisdom and all of that stuff. But inherent to that is a hermit nature. So I am extroverted. I do want to meet people. I do want to connect. I can be a firehouse in a room. Podcast is my thing. I get energy from this stuff, man. When I'm done with this pod, I'm going to just be filled with energy. It's what happens. But I need to maintain my downtime, my inherent hermetic or hermetic mode. Like I need to go into hermit's mode. Also, what I find now is the masculine side of me is very projecting into the world, but I have to bake in these moments of feminine surrender, silence, introversion, receiving to be able to charge. So it's a balance, but 9 times out of 10, you find me being out there. Why?
so I because when you were talking about like growing up and not like quite like other kids not really being interested in the same thing you're interested in that thing, like I can totally resonate with that because that's kind of how I was. Like I one of the things that I noticed when I was young
Mm,
is I noticed that I noticed things a lot more than other kids. Like
Yes.
I would literally notice every little thing around me, and I would like overthink everything, and I would be overly curious about every little thing, and if I need to learn something, like. But what I notice is that a lot of other kids, they kind of they don't notice, first of all, their surrounding as much, and also if they don't understand something, they don't stop and ask questions, or like they're not curious. They're like, oh, whatever. Like when you watch a movie, right? Like I have this personality where if I miss something, I have to like stop, rewind, and rewatch it. Whereas
Gotcha.
in a lot of people are just okay with missing stuff, right? Like not understanding something, and that actually, I always thought I was a weirdo because of that, right? And that's not so cool, right? With kids, like it's actually cool to not care, right? To not, you know what I mean? So I actually pretended to be stupid. I pretended like I didn't see it. I pretended like I didn't. I don't understand what that. Like I had to pretend to be dumb
Gotcha.
so that I can fit in. So that I can, like, people would think I'm cool. Do you understand what I mean?
What's happening there is there's a core being of you which has that energy of noticing, but because that core being is or did not get the recognition it needed, you started to dissociate. So you dissociate from your core element and show up with this harder exterior because there was a core feeling that you were not understood by life, right? And
That's exactly what happened. Yeah.
I'm sure that has proliferated into other aspects of your life. This is the fuel source. Like I always tell people, find your fuel source. This is the thing. For me, I had that separation, but instead of dissociating, and I would dissociate if I have a really big person in front of me who's not listening. I go into sarcasm mode, and there are many of them. You can find them.
Mm.
I go into sarcasm where my brain looks at you and goes, "Oh, you can't see what I can see. You're smaller than I am." I minimize the person, and I stay in my egoic shell within myself. But that did happen. And it still does happen in some ways because that is a gift, right? When you can just see things, it's a gift. Like now, most of the people I bond with are people who have the same blessing. I wouldn't say sickness. It's this thing of noticing. For example, when I was driving on the German Autobahn and I was going flat out, I stopped. I stopped putting my mind in so many different things. I can focus on the line of the car and literally notice through my periphery indicators and other people's indicators as I'm going 240 on the highway, right? So this is a gift because you start to see things. I see it in music. I see it in the tastemakers and the friends I work with. Anybody I'm working with on brand, the clients I resonate with, there's an inherent ability to notice and take more of life in. And that for me is a gift because most people, they don't see it and they miss a whole range of information from life, which, yes.
I also had another question. Because
Please.
you lived in U.S. and you lived in so many different countries. What is your what's your thoughts on the U.S.? Like, what? How do you think when you came here? How do you, like? Obviously, there's some things you already shared, but how do you think we're different, and why do you think we're like that? Do you understand what I mean?
Americans are not exposed. Americans are not exposed. It's like Americans live in a bubble.
Mm,
I was even having a conversation with someone about what I think about the quality of healers and psychotherapy and holistic health stuff, because this is my business within other side. And I think there's an inherent culmination of some of the best talent and culture within Europe that just exposes you to many different perspectives. So a part of me would like to spend some more time in America, right? I'm going to visit later on in the year. And I liked it. There was an inherent massive opportunities, money related. It's great for that stuff. But it's so in your face that now there's a statement, it's like à la poubelle, right? It's French for trash. Like when I see certain things in America, I'm like, it's, it's the American way, it's the American sales way, it's the American design way. It's all just in your face. It's like wine that's not good, that's just red, not
mm,
nice.
mm,
Whereas in Europe, this is one of the things I love in Europe, even the musical options I have in Europe, when I show some music to Americans, it's always like, what? Like, it's like you're opening a new field. So one of the reasons I like Europe is that with America, you have access to money, you have access to ability to connect with people. There's always this
Mm,
flow. And the thing that is really good about Americans is this natural belief in themselves. Right? You have people who have quarter of the talent and they fucking believe it. And they're just like, I'm the best shit in the room. Shut the fuck up. They're like, I'm the best. I'm the best. Right? Whereas in Europe, it's the opposite, especially in a place like England.
mm,
You have this self minimizing thing, which for me, I detest. Right? You have this, it's like a culture of minimizing yourself and your capability.
mm,
And so when you try to raise your head, there's always this, no, 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 don't shout too much. That's a very German
mm,
English thing.
mm,
In Spain, they just want to chill and have fun and all of
mm.
that stuff. Whereas in America, it's you can do it.
Yeah, actually, I never even thought about that until you just mentioned it. But it's so true. Like here, and it's probably because like everyone here is either an immigrant or like is descendants of an immigrant. I think
Yeah.
immigrants who like left their home, left everything behind to seek for opportunity. There's something about them that are just risk taking, bold, like believing themselves even though it's delusional, like that. But I that like you said, I think is helpful in some ways. That
Hmm.
delusional confidence, I think, is helpful in some ways, but it's also probably what makes us like in our bubble. We're like, I don't need to know about anyone else. I'm the best. So, you know what I mean? Like that kind of. So I guess that's the pros and cons, like of of either side.
Another thing I think is there is the inherent taste for life. Yes, you have culture. That's one thing. But even like the holiday system in America, there's this idea that you are somehow separate from your body, you're somehow separate from your being, you're somehow separate from life. There's inherent separation in America, right? So when I meet people in the States, the priority on their health, the priority on their body is not really, it's not really there. The thing they accept is not really, the standards are not really there, and it's very in your face. But look, it's also the country that brings a lot of good into the world. So I would
Yeah,
toe the
yeah. No,
line.
I'm not. Yeah. I mean, I think every weakness is a strength, and every strength is a weakness. So it's
Yeah.
So kind of let's go back to your life. So you
Okay.
were here, and what for university, and then what happened? What was like the next chapter of your life?
Family went broke. And I remember a conversation when I was in class, and I said, "Hey, I called my parents up. My younger brother was meant to go to school. We didn't have cash for him, especially if they were going to keep paying for my tuition. My older brother was about to graduate. We didn't have cash to pay for him to graduate. And I said, guys, let me just come out of. I have the highest bill here. Let's quit. I can go to Germany because I'm European. Berlin was calling me. There was this idea of parties and connections, and it was this really weird place. No one in my family had been there. I had all my family, a lot of my family members in the UK, and the UK was always an option. But a part of me wanted to do something different. I kind of wanted to make it harder for myself. So I went into Germany. That was where I had this heart resonance, and I decided to just trust fall into the universe. And what I realized now is that was one of the biggest activations of a lot of the spiritual thing that I teach to people. Because when I went to Germany, the place I lived in Berlin, if you don't know, sometimes it can take you 6 months to find a house in Berlin. I went there staying in a hostel, and people asked me what my plan was. I was like, no, I'll manifest one. Watch. She's like, you're crazy. This is Berlin. Like, this is 6 months. Because you need to get the house to get something called an Anmeldung, which is a registration in the city. And you need the Anmeldung to get the house. So it's a catch 22.
Mm-mm.
And you also need the Anmeldung to get a bank account, which you need to get the house. So you get into this crazy system where most people are there and they can never register, so they can never find work. I come in, I'm playing around, having fun, going to parties left and right, do a few applications to a couple of houses, find an amazing location, which is super random and weird for individuals. And for some reason, the man liked me and I was able to connect with him. And it was just our resonance and connection that brought that into my life. And then
Mm.
after that, I tried doing the whole school thing in Germany. Didn't work out as well. It was just a lot of process. You have to learn the language. And I got a job and I was cleaning floors. And while I was cleaning floors, I said to myself, I'm going to clean these floors in the best way possible. Now we're going to get into the frequency part of the story. Because as I was activating my frequency, I had to tell myself, whatever I do, I have to do it to the highest frequency because that's the only way I can jump into the next band. So I still remember the tiles clearly as I speak to you, where I was scrubbing food off of a lady's floor that her baby had spilled. And I told myself, I'm going to just do this in the best way possible. How can I love this process? And that kept me in this high energy. And I did that for a while, for a short while. And I remember going to clean houses one day, and I was speaking to my ex on the phone who was still in the US. And I was like, you know what? I think had an Adidas hoodie on that she bought me. I was like, I really like this Adidas hoodie. I want to work at Adidas. It's like, I'm going to go manifest an Adidas job. That same night, that day, I was speaking to her on the phone, applied for the job. I think it was a Sunday or Saturday. By Tuesday, I randomly got a call saying, hey, like from Adidas, we saw your application. We don't hire non-English or non-German speakers, but how is your Deutsch? I was like, aber my Deutsch ist ein bisschen gut. Ich kann Deutsch sprechen. Just touting whatever. And from there, having the conversation with them, it's like, I don't know about your German, but maybe you teach me English, I teach you German. And I got the job. Right. And that was another boom manifestation. There's a series of this. I'll let you pause if you have a question.
Yeah. So at this period in your life, was there something did you have any kind of like goals or something that you wanted to achieve? Or were you kind of just kind of living, in the present moment, like day to day? Like what was
money?
Okay,
so
it was like
no,
just all
I needed stability, and
like
I
survival
have
mode.
this. Sorry, go on.
Like, was it like just survival mode, or was it like was it more out of necessity, or did you actually want to build wealth? Do you
Understood.
know
It
what I
was
mean?
both. It was both.
Okay.
It was, you need to start earning money because I have big dreams for myself. I've always had. I'm really that person who I have exorbitant dreams for myself. I can't even say exorbitant. To me, they're real. So I have these ideas for myself. So I wanted to make money. I wanted more freedom. My parents were giving me some cash, but it wasn't as steady. So I needed to figure a couple of things out. Family was trying to support. And it was just time. I had stuff to do. I wanted to work, right? I'd played around and partied as much as I could. After a while of doing that stuff, you just get to a natural point where your body says, hey, it's time to move forward, at least for me.
Have you read The Surrender Experiment?
No, I haven't.
Put it on your list. So this is from the CEO of WebMD,
Okay.
how he went from being a yogi to having a $300 million company or whatever it was, right? Because WebMD was $3 billion at a point, and he had like $300 million of that. And it talks about his process of how, by just surrendering into life brought a lot of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of what we're also speaking about in the story, where I had to just surrender into life. I just chose to keep, okay, this is where it's leading me. Let's go in that direction. Let's surrender in this. And through that process, you just naturally get into this flow, and whatever happens, happens. Still can be freaky on the way, but it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I totally believe in that. I don't know if you saw what I posted on Instagram yesterday, but I was telling this story of, when you were talking about when you were cleaning the floor. What it reminded me of, my first job in high school was I used to work at this place called Kumon, which is like a math learning center, and my job was to grade papers. So, students will do their homework, they'll bring it, and then I just match. I have the answer book here, so I just go through and I grade it, right? But I'm like you. Like my whole life, I've always been like, whatever I do, I'm either gonna try to do it, become the best at that, or I don't do it, right? So when I had that job, what I did was I memorized the answer book, so that I don't have to look at it, and I can just and that saved me so much time because I don't have to go back and forth and read it. Also, like I remember I worked in college. I worked in a grocery store where they track how fast you work, right? So once I start scanning the items, like they have an average timer of like how many seconds per item, right? So one of the things is there's a book. So if you have like vegetables or fruits, you can't just scan it. You have to look up the price per pound, and you have to. So what I did was I just memorized it, so that I don't have to look it up. So I actually like doubled everyone's time. But things like that, like I've always been like that, where whatever I do, I just give it. So I try to do it like literally. If I wash the dishes, I'm gonna try to be the best dishwasher in the world. That's kind of like that's what that story reminded me of, and that's always worked for me.
Same, brother, same here. Like setting up for the pod, like I moved stuff around. I'm like, let's get a different angle. Like cleaning up my home at night is the same thing. It needs to be. I want to do it, and it's a really terrible mechanism, right? Because it depends on where it's from. It can be a perfectionist side, which is the role you have to play as a perfect child to get the recognition you wanted in your life. So you actually have to break that mechanism, which is tough. But for me, when that kicks in, I could be at the gym and really just see the plates and go, if I put the stack of fives behind the stack of tens, it's fine. Move on. No, it's not fucking fine. No way. Now I have to take the tens and put it right, and then make sure I pick up all the 2.5s and stack them in front of the fives also, because I have done it, so it has to be perfect. So there is this point, and when it happens, I catch myself. I'm like, oh fuck, because it kicks in, and I can't leave that thing now. Also, it's immediate OCD. It's like that's getting done perfectly to the T. I like perfection. It's
But for me, that actually is that I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for that, because I remember like my first project that I did, it didn't make sense for me financially because it took me way longer than they paid me. But I just wanted to do the best job on that website. And that's what got me the next project. And that's the same, I did it again. And then that's what got me, and that's how I kept the new opportunities kept coming. Like even when I go on a sales call, I have zero agenda. I'm just trying to have the best conversation possible in this 1 hour that I'm talking to this person, and usually I'll close the sale. do you understand what I mean?
It is, and I try to bring that in. In fact, in my sales process, so we do packages for other side. It's going to cost anywhere from 150 to 300K to be a member, right? And you don't get access if you don't get, like, you still have to go through a process to prove you're ready to go on the journey. And initially, we were driving the sale, and people feel that when you're trying to drive that kind of sale. And this is a principle from Tantra, which is a way of having sexual connection, which is no goals. And by putting that into my process, I don't know where this is going. Let's meet. Let's just naturally flow and see what happens. Something happens. And the reason I tell you one of the reasons it works is because for a lot of men, I wish we can capture this. Maybe we'll get there again. For a lot of men in these processes, or inherently what someone is looking for when they're coming to you for work like that, is they're looking for safety for their internal feminine. And they usually come up with their masculine god. When you have a goal, their goal is to protect their inner feminine. So there's an innate energetic response that you're meeting. When you drop the goal and you start to connect, what happens is they naturally feel safe and they can start going into their internal feminine. And it's typically that internal feminine that will come in and buy. The masculine is just a checkbox. So you need the masculine checkbox, which is Sunny, what have you done, blah, blah, blah. But in that moment of connection, you need to connect with that inner feminine. And once you do start to have that inner connection, God's dropped. Now, when they come out of that room, they go back into the masculine, go back into the world and all of that. But what you're really doing is you're finding safety for them to step into the inner feminine. If you do that, you will see it in a person's face when they're not safe. There's just like, where are you trying to take me in this call? There's a lot of this. Soon as that's gone, it's like, oh, fuck. Especially in a world where everybody tells you Grant Cardone this bitch. It's like everybody tells you don't want to do that.
Yeah, no, I actually I tried that. One of my first job this wasn't a real job. It was like a kind of what do you call it? MLM kind of thing. So
nice.
in so they get these high school kids, and what they do is like we have to sell these kitchen knives, and what they have us to do is like
what's the name?
A,
Fuck.
a
I
lot of
remember the
kids
name
did
of the
it. Yeah,
book.
I literally
Yeah, I remember it. What's it?
sold one like to my aunt, and I couldn't do it because I couldn't get I couldn't get myself to follow the script, and it was just so it just felt so like disingenuous.
Absolutely. I forget what's the name of this thing. I'm
It's
gonna
called
turn on the camera in a second.
Cutco knives.
Oh, Cutco
Yeah,
knives.
I mean some of them are really good. Some of these kits were like killing it, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I actually
I know a guy
yeah.
who's back from France and did something similar. I think he's worth 20 million now. Yeah, man. Like he used to be a client of mine, and we did like medicine and this kind of work together, and it's like loaded
Yeah, I mean people that are good
on
in
that.
sales, like I can see like probably the people that really were successful in Cutco are probably super
Yeah,
successful right now because they
yeah.
like 99% of them didn't, right? Like 99% of them couldn't do that. But there was that 1% who's like that. I don't know if you know Andy Elliott, the the car
Oh,
salesman. That yeah.
Elliot.
So there's that 1% that's like that, right? They're like just so much energy and so like
They're hurting, Sonny. They're hurting.
they're hurting.
They're hurting. Like this is one of my missions to change. This is the fuel source thing. Like a lot of these guys you see, they can't stop their chatterbox, right? So Andy Elliott, he's gonna make the next deal and the next deal, gonna be a billionaire, but he can't stop his chatterbox, right? And when you see that, I actually feel a lot of pain. It's nice, and you get a lot of inspiration from these people, but I actually see a lot of pain, and they're in deep states of hurt because what happens if, like, the question I would ask anybody who's doing that, it's okay, great. So you want to do all of this stuff. If I take away your ability to do any of that, what's left of you and your ability to enjoy life?
Oh, I see what you mean.
If you ask that question
Do you think
and you start, go on.
out of like all those like super successful entrepreneurs and whatever people creators and people out there, like who do you think is actually not hurting?
I've met few of them. I've really met few of them, but I do know a few of them, and they're not like in the media and all of
Oh,
that.
okay.
Because what happens is, and please ask me this so we get it on the pod. What's happened is to get to that level of success, right? You work off what's called an adversity-based fuel source. This is that thing of needing to prove and needing space and blah blah blah. That adversity fuel source gets you to a point of ego fulfillment. True fulfillment happens when you get to the spiritual level. This is when you can die complete. But the thing is, the ego fulfillment piece, there's a barrier there because what happens to these people is they get stuck in a golden cage. They have the money, they have a lot of the stuff, and they either decide to stay there, but if they want true fulfillment, they realize that the friends and the people around them are not pushing them deeper enough into the states of their being.
Mhm.
So a lot of these men need to get to that point, and I ask me this again. A lot of these men need to get to that point of the golden cage because that's where they start to have pain. But that's also where they become a point. They officially become a point in this life. That transition is fucking hard. That's why even other side is there because the process is not a 3 month course process. You're going into psychedelics, trauma work, sexual stuff. Like that's what other side does. Is that 3 month? Is that sorry 2 3 year process? You're going through a journey because that process of becoming a wave is an unlearning. So most of these guys, especially the Americans, they create rhetorics of why they keep going. Another book, they're going to help 1 billion people. I was writing my own ethos yesterday, and it's like I was writing the whole "you want to help 1 billion people," and at a point I was like, I told my guys, I was like, look, I don't really fucking want to help 1 billion people. I really just found the thing that I love doing in life, and when I do this thing and I help people, and I'm on retreat and I'm seeing someone transform in front of me, I have a state of bliss that just makes me feel one with the world. So it's not about the 1 billion people. Like it's that. And for me, I was lucky because I got to find that before all of the success. So I got to start dropping that. So I started becoming a wave. A lot of people need that experience of being a point to realize that being a point does not help them in really finding fulfillment, then they go on that journey. Few people bypass it early. I guess it's something with the soul. Most people have that. So this Andy Frisella, I love Frisella and Ed Milet and these people, but like the Andy Elliots, and you see that gun energy in him. Oh man, that's just someone who has a lot to prove in the world, and he's gonna get to a point where it's like there's nothing to prove, and that's when his journey starts. He's not awake until that point, and you can be 60 years old, and that happens, and then that's day one of your life. There's something. To get to fulfillment, you have to become a wave. So you have to let go of a lot of the identities that brought you to that point to become a wave.
If you don't change your fuel source, one of the friction points people have with manifestation is, and this is just for your own knowledge, the friction point people have with manifestation is because they haven't done the initial fuel source work and the initial childhood deconditioning work. The stuff they're manifesting is coming out of that trauma response, which I mentioned earlier. And what they're trying to manifest sometimes is antithetical to their soul's journey, right? So they're trying to manifest things that proves their decision right, because that's their subconscious and their RAS being activated, but it's antithetical to what their soul is here to experience. As a result of that, there's a conflict. And then you see them go through friction and have to go through a lot of friction. So if I meet someone before they get to the golden cage and we start working on the transition for them, right, what we start to do is you really start to go into deconditioning. So you can start finding and resonating with what your soul really wants to find, because that's what the inner child has. But the experiences the inner child has creates a shell that prevents you from accessing. Then you end up like Andy Elliott making a decision, and I don't know what his soul's mission is, but no offense. You end up making a decision about life, and then you run that decision through life, and you come off in this way, but underneath it is just a fully separated boy. And to get to that point, you have to have a lot more friction to manifest, because you're inauthentic. And when we connect back into your fuel source, you get into authenticity. The fastest way to move through the quantum field is to be authentic, because now you really affirm your uniqueness, so you can bring your uniqueness out into the world. Other people can recognize that, because your uniqueness, your level of unique expression is higher than theirs. You're a magnetic force. But you can't access that inherent magnetic force unless you've done that inner child work. Carry on.
So do you think that's why people like say, I want to manifest a Lamborghini? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, do you think that's where that's coming from?
I want the next 911 GT3S, sure. Like, but I think a lot of people want it for what it's going to give them, the ego, the recognition. And there's always inherently some of that. If you're a nerd like me, you just want cars. I just love cars, right? Like, I've probably watched almost every Top Gear episode. I'm just in that kind of car nerd zone. In that case, go for that.
Yeah, but you know that's not like, for most people it's status, right? Like I want to manifest a mansion. I want to manifest, like
go 3 levels deep. You want a mansion because what's your brain telling you? And people need to really identify their core voice. What is your brain telling you? I want to manifest a mansion, and immediately the vision you're seeing is pulling up to your mansion and someone looking at you from a good place or looking up to you. Great. What does that give me? Comfort. Where did I lose comfort? That's the question you need to ask. Because if you find where you lost comfort and you go 3 to 7 layers deeper into the question, you find what you need to fix. And when you fix that, the Lamborghini starts to manifest itself. I've seen this happen so many times.
100%. I believe that because, I work with a lot of like clients who are in this space, and like when we do like the messaging, it always comes down to only 2 things. Like you said, like there's like the early part of someone's journey where what they were chasing is success. And then once they've achieved success, there's that second part of the journey where they have to actually go deeper, right? And I just feel like, whenever I meet people and they're really like, like they work hard and they're like kind of go-getter or whatever it is, they always like fit into one of these 2 types. So, but let's kind of
I have to say though, before we move back, that is to the point of you need to become a point before you become a wave. So for those people, they need objective proof in their physical body that what they're doing does not give them what they want inherently. And that is the motivator, because then they can ask the "and then what" question. That now kicks off the soul journey. Carry on.
I agree. Like, I forgot who said this, but like, I do think that everybody has to make money first, because until you do, until you scratch that itch, I can tell you all I want. It's like money doesn't matter. Blah 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 blah. I can tell you all I want. You're not gonna listen to me until you've experienced that yourself and really know that it doesn't mean anything.
Indeed.
You know what I mean? Okay, so going back to kind of like your Adidas.
Yes.
So one question I had from that point was, have you always kind of believed in manifesting like your whole life, like, or is that something that you picked up like somewhere along the line?
It
Do you
goes
know what I
back
mean?
to the point of when I started reading about these books. U.S. Anderson, the three magic words is about I am. And then you have the secret in these different books. So I don't remember a time when I didn't, right? I can't remember a time when I didn't believe in this inherent ability for magic to happen. I mean, I'm coming from a home where I've gone through and seen magic happen in front of my eyes, like near death situations, and where you really have this energy of God and the universe stepping in to create something that just didn't seem likely. It happened sequentially in my or severally in my family. So I don't remember a time I didn't believe in the impossible. Now, over the years, of course, I've put more words to it, but I started reading about this super early. Um, so I really can't remember when I didn't have that hopeful.
Oh, got it. So maybe you weren't using the word "I'm manifesting," but you knew that, if you believe in something, that
By Adidas,
you
I
can
was
make it
definitely
happen.
manifesting for sure. Like America and all of that, I
Uh-huh.
was already there. When I was younger, I will have situations where it's like you write an exam and pray for the best, and you really believe in that prayer.
Okay, like, so yeah, I guess that's one form of manifesting. Um, so yeah, so what happened after Adidas?
So
Like,
Adidas was manifested that super last minute. Then I remember being at the Adidas store about a month in, and I was tying shoelaces and having a conversation. And the lady at she was telling me to stop talking and focus on tying shoelaces. And I went, "Who the fuck are you talking to?" In my mind, I went into that sarcastic mode, and I was like, "I studied engineering. I am smart at what I do. You think I can't tie shoelaces and have a conversation? The fuck?" I got so mad that on my way home, I told myself, and I called a friend. We ended up sitting across each other. I was like, I would manifest a job, right? That's paying me way better than this, that just elevates me. And I'm going to have so many things to myself. And I listed a bunch of different things. It's going to put me on a path to earn through $200,000 a year. And I'm not going to look for the job. It's like, dude, you're crazy. About a week later, I was walking from the train station in Rittenstrasse, or whatever it is in Berlin, and I get a phone call from a friend of a friend. "Hey, Adeyemi, just wanted to check in with you. I got your number from XYZ. Love the energy that you typically show up with, blah, blah, blah. Hey, we're looking to set up our company in the UK and have an English speaking version of our company. Can we have a chat?" Later that week, a couple of days later, went to have a chat with him. Turns out the office was 5 minutes walk from my Adidas store, and essentially got this job that put me as a logistics real estate salesman to sell logistics spaces to help companies bridge the gap between Europe and Brexit, or between the UK and Europe due to Brexit, and have a logistics subsidiary in Berlin with this state of the art logistic warehouse that they were making. Path of the job, potential of earning 200K or more if I make all the commissions and blah, blah, blah. I have my own office. I get to dress as nice as I want. And within a week or so, I had manifested that role, right? And that was that first boom. It's like, oh, wow, this is interesting. That put me into my foray into sales. The company didn't work out. It crashed, but it set me up for at a certain point after it crashed to realize that, hey, Berlin wasn't really working. The jobs I wanted to work at they were not really it anymore, especially when that one and that company crashed. And also the general environment in Berlin was not giving me this propulsion to move forward. I remember I was sending some mail and I was walking down the street. If anybody doesn't know, Berlin is super crazy, lots of drugs, lots of different things. And I was walking down, it was 3:40 something in the afternoon. I remember it clearly, and I saw 4 people in Power Rangers outfits, probably coming from some club. And I was like, yeah, I'm fucking done with this place. right? So when I saw that, I made the decision to leave. But that particular role in the logistics subsidiary opened up my career in fintech, in sales management, in tech, right? So it was this, again, really trust in life and going with the nudges. I needed to be in Berlin to get certain experiences, which encoded certain imprints in me. But by really making the decision at that shoe store and allowing anger to propel me forward and making a direct decision for me from that space, the universe opened. So manifesting has been a big part of my life. And again, it's going to keep showing up as we get further and further.
So do you think so that job that you had
Yep.
after Adidas, the real estate
Mhm.
one, like were you doing that job like how you were mopping the floor? Like were you just giving it like all, like trying to be the best? And is that what led to the opportunity? Because we
The
just
Adidas
yeah.
job, I was trying my best. I did relax
Mhm.
a little bit more on the real estate job. It's a new industry. I couldn't really figure it out. I
Mhm.
tried, but there was this lack of clarity from the company. Things weren't really moving as well. And it got to a point where they stopped paying me. Right. And at that point I was like,
Mm.
okay, like I don't really know what you
Mhm.
want me to do here anymore. Um,
Yeah.
so I had that. I tried to work with my manager at that point. He's still a very good friend of mine. And we worked together. We just tried to figure it out. But it became clear after a while that, hey, we're kind of wasting our time here. And then we got the
Yeah.
confirmation that we weren't getting paid. And I remember actually the day I got the confirmation, I was in Rome and then I had an accident shortly after. So make sure if anybody gets a confirmation, make sure you don't drive that day.
Okay, so what happened next? How, with your
London
next
was next.
position?
And
Okay.
London was another one because there, after a while, I was speaking to family and it's like, hey, maybe explore a different option. So I went into London, manifested myself into a fintech role. Before that, when I got to London, I was dead broke. I got to a point where I had £6 in my pocket, which is the equivalent of about $7. The way the Rock Johnson had $7, I had £6. And my co-founder of Other Side Now, we met in Manchester at that point because I was living with my sister initially. But the energy again, I'm all about energy. If you really look at this story, I'm all about the energetics of where I stay. And when I was around my sister, she kept saying, go to university, go get a small job here, go do this thing in this manner, and just hustle your way through. It made sense logically. My body could not freaking do it. I got pissed at even hearing the thought of giving me this logical approach. I was like, no, I'm going to go figure it out. I'll get the best job. I'll work in sales. I'll make $150,000. I'm really delusional like that. And at a point when she kept on harping about it and the house was quite stiff while I was working with or staying with her, sleeping on her floor, I called up my brother. I said, hey, man, I have to come to you and this is just not working out for me. The energy here is not right and I can't do this. I need to figure out my own way. He allowed me to stay on his floor. And that's when I got to the point where I was earning £6. In that period, I was actually still messaging on Instagram and I saw this guy who was building a startup in Manchester. I still wanted to network. And I reached out to him and I went to network with him. We had coffee at Starbucks. 6 years later, he's the person who told me to start creating videos and doing what I do online. And he's my co-founder now at Other Side, where we're changing many men's lives, right? In that moment. So you never know what can happen. But to get to the £6 story, I remember a day when I had £6, didn't have more cash than that. And I went to the grocery store. I believe I got some food or something. No, actually, I got to the grocery store, was about to buy some stuff, saw someone who was homeless outside, looked at them, and I had this thing in me that said, give all the money away. If you really believe and if you really trust, give it all away. Okay. I believe. I trust. So I gave it all away. You wouldn't believe it, son. By the time I got home, I called my sister and I said, hey, any chance you can give me £20, which is like $24. She's like, oh, it's funny. Mom just sent you 100. It's like, oh, that's cool. By that evening, my brother came home. We hadn't spoken. He was washing dishes downstairs. He came up. He's like, hey, man, I've been washing dishes downstairs, but something tells me to give you all of this change that I have. He gave me $86 or 86 pounds. By the end of that day, I had 30x the amount I had, 180 instead of 6. There's something that happens when you trust life. Something magical happens. Now, I wish the story with my brother went as well. Turns out, no offense to you, his Asian landlady, she didn't like me very much, and she didn't like the fact that I was squatting in her house, and she kicked me out. And she was like, "Hey, man, you got to go." So, with those whole stories,
Sounds pretty
it
Asian.
does sound pretty Asian. I was like, "Where's your heart?" She's like, "No, money, man. Like, come on, you got to go." I was like, "Okay, cool." So, in that moment, I had unwavering belief. And to anyone listening to this, if you want to do anything, you have to be delusional. I had unwavering belief, and I kept applying to jobs, and a fintech role popped up as an intern in this fintech company. Of course, I went to the interview. It was funny because I went to the interview with all my bags because I left my brother's house. Now I went to stay with my aunt, and I had no choice but to make this interview work. And when they saw my bags there and the way I showed up and how clean I was, but also the fact that, hey, I was all in on this, they decided to give me the role. And that opened something for me where now I was living in London, earning £1,300 a month, and probably had, $120 for food after everything. So I started my whole journey there, but I kept on going. I would show up, I believe, in those role in that particular role. I would do 2x the output my colleagues were doing. Like they're doing 700 leads, I'm doing 2,000. I'm showing up on Sunday bright and early. They're like, "What?" It's like, "Yeah, I'm here on Sunday." By the time you get up on Monday and people show up on Monday, I'm 30-40% through my target. Wild. And that's what set me up for many things. And then I started going and I decided I wanted another job. I tripled my salary by looking for another job, and I just kept stepping up from there.
Like your journey sounds so similar to mine in the sense that, so for the people listening, can you kind of, because you've used the word manifesting a lot, so for people who don't know what manifesting is, can you quickly kind of give description? And I want to also touch back on what we talked about during our break.
Manifesting is really using your will, your inner mind, to create a reality that you don't see in the world and to just make things happen. Everything in the world starts from thought. Nothing in the world exists without thought first. What you're doing with manifesting is you're using your thoughts to impregnate the world and to change your reality, right? The real reality is in your mind. And with manifesting, you're essentially saying, how can I design a future for myself or reality for myself that does not yet exist? Stay in the frequency and that thought, with that thought in your mind and in that frequency until it shows up in your life. And what happens is when you do this with intent, your life changes because you're tapping into your higher power.
Can you we talked a little bit about like doing it the wrong way, right? So can you can you explain that part again?
Yeah. So I imagine most of the people who are listening, they're trying to grow. They have some business or they've already reached some level of success and now they want to branch out into something else. Manifesting is a core part of that. And I have a lot of gripe and issues with the way people tout manifesting in the world. Because there's this thing of The Secret, just see it and believe it and hold a thought in your mind and you're going to create. What I found from my own life and from the people I work with is that does not happen. What happens, and that's actually a very inefficient way to manifest, because actually it can happen. It just takes a lot of friction because there's a lot of hard work and blah, 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 trying to make that reality happen. The fastest way to manifest instead is to manifest with something that's in alignment with your soul. Is to first of all find your authentic frequency in life, resonate at that frequency and manifest from that frequency. And the way you find your authentic frequency is to first of all drop all concepts of who you have of yourself. Really go beneath why you want the things you want. So for example, you want a car. You need to go 3 levels into why you want the car and go, hey, Maybe I want the car because someone is going to look at me nice and make me feel welcomed. You have to ask yourself, where did I stop feeling welcomed in my life? This opens the door into shadow work, inner child work, where you have to spend time really understanding your inner child. And what tends to happen is when you connect to your inner child, you're actually connecting to your soul, because your child and your inner child is that first direct access you had into your soul and spiritual consciousness, right? Which is why when someone, or when you have an experience that causes, or you have a traumatic experience as a child that separates you from that, you build a shell to protect that inner child. It's a natural response, because that's your direct access to your soul. So the wrong way to manifest is to just create a reality and to try to step into it. The best way to manifest is to, first of all, go into the programs that are separating you from your reality and the reality you want, but also really spend time understanding yourself and being in that frequency. What often happens is the things people want and the reality they want before they do the inner child work is completely different to the reality they want after doing the inner child work. And when you start to get into that frequency post inner child work, where you're connected into your soul and you're manifesting from that soul frequency, things happen very quickly. So the biggest gripe I have with the manifestation world is oftentimes the things they tell you to manifest and the strategy they tell you to use causes you to manifest things that are antithetical to what your soul wants. So you have a person who says, I want a big car, I want a house, I want to be seen, and all of this stuff. But it's the opposite of what his soul really wants. The soul wants to do something else. The soul doesn't want to be the most successful CEO. The soul wants to be an artist who earns money in this way that's free and can express itself. When it's trying to manifest the CEO role, you have this defense mechanism, the egoic mind, that's trying to manifest this thing, whereas the soul wants a different experience. You're antithetical, you stay stuck. And this is why a lot of people stay stuck and they go, I'm not manifesting. I'm like, what direction are you going in? What's the real thing you want? What's the block? When you change that, things accelerate.
Can you give me an example of, let's say, somebody who, let's say, is manifesting $1 billion or whatever it is, right? Or let's not even go billion. Let's say $1 million.
Yes.
Okay.
If you haven't made $1 million, don't manifest $1 billion. It's too far for your brain to conceive. It's not going to work. I know from experience.
Yeah. So that person, let's say they're doing it out of, they're not doing it. Let's say that's not like their authentic self wanting that, right? What would be an example, like, of what would they want instead? Like,
I had a client who went from, and this happens in different ways. He went from, and I don't really do manifesting work anymore. Like, for me, it's one of those things that is just a standard. But when I started, I had this client who was earning 6,000 euros a year, right? Or so it was earning 6,000 euros a month. That was the highest amount he had ever earned in his life, right? Whenever he hit that figure, something would happen and he would crash. He hit his money ceiling in life, right? And this has been the case for 20 years. He was never able to crack 6,000 euros a month. And when we started doing the work, he initially wanted to go into investment and learn some investment strategies and a few different things from me. And I looked at him and I went, I think there is something else you need to learn here. I don't think the opportunity for you is learning this strategy and getting some. I think you need to change your money frequency and go deeper. When we did the work and went deeper, we identified the blocks that he had with money, which was around his growing up, where not having money caused him to be in a scene where he got beaten up, right? And also there was something there with his father. So he was actually looking for connection with his father, and his soul needed to resolve that situation that happened regarding money. So every time he pushed for more money, money inherently underlying to him meant he was unsafe. Money meant pain. So whenever he got to 6,000 euros a month, which was where he calibrated, for some reason he fell sick, something crashed in his life. When we went into that process and started healing that, and he was able to process the underlying emotions which he had never processed before, the pattern on his soul level really just went from being super active to calm. Very quickly, shift of events started to happen in the quantum space, because we're in a quantum space where there are multiple realities. And as soon as he shifted his energetic state, his relationship to his father shifted. That little boy got the connection he never had. 6 months later, he manifests 250,000. Actually, 2 months after our work, he manifests $250,000 6 months after that, he crosses the $1 million mark. It came to him. And I remember the cries on the phone where he's like, I don't even understand what's happening. It came to him. So with manifestation, I don't even do as many, I want to manifest this with a list anymore. I try to find the part of me that feels undeserving, and I hack manifestation completely differently, where I try to instead find what I really want and need on a soul level and what I want to experience, what's potentially blocking me from that and having that experience now, and I go work on whatever that is instead. And there
Yeah.
are many different ways that we can hack this, but
Yeah.
no one talks
Well,
about this, and it's super annoying.
the reason why I wanted to bring it up is exactly that. Like like now I've been working in this space, with like a lot of spiritual leaders and all of that for years, and like I'm really like not a fan of
Yeah,
manifestation. Like I'm not a fan of this whole language of, because I think what it did for the world is, instead of doing good, I think it just kind of misinformed the world on what manifesting is. And I just feel, because I'm a very science kind of driven
same.
person, and like everything that you're telling me, I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. That's kind of how I feel like I had to go through that. I had to go through my inner child. I had to go through my childhood and,
Yeah,
like face my
yeah,
childhood traumas and all of that, in order to get out of that mindset of scarcity mindset, that all of that, right? And same thing, like just being present with somebody, and that we were talking about, just being present, and that leading to more opportunities and more opportunities, combined with like, also you have discipline, right? So I think a lot of people just manifest and they just sit in the couch and like hoping that something is going to happen. So I just feel like manifesting, I don't like that word, because I feel like it's been misinterpreted by so many people. That's why I just wanted to kind of cover that. And you know i I believe in all of those things, and I believe in how helpful those are. I just don't like the words, and I don't really like actually I don't agree with the waves and energy thing.
the inherent need for someone to manifest is to try to direct their life in a way that maybe they're not happy with their current position. The most powerful you can be when you're recreating your life is to come into a point where you can rest in whatever life is presenting to you. The very need to manifest is this intention to force life, right? And for me, I've gone past a lot of that point, right? And this is why I also change the work that I do, because you start to meet a lot of people who want to manifest and change and all of that. But you have to ask yourself, what are we doing? What is the core part of you that's unhappy with yourself and how you're expressed into the world? I believe that your internals and your internal state is what's expressed in the world around you. If you're always constantly moving and trying to change and push and all of that, there's an inherent unrest inside your body, which is being projected in your reality because your eyes are the projector. My work now, and where I see the most progress, is to really come into removing anything that's stopping you from resting where you are. This is why we talked about how people need to make money, and when after they make money, they really have to start their life after they make money, right? Because then they have to ask the question: even though I've made all of this money and I've manifested all of these things, why am I not happy? Why can't I rest? Why am I in this golden cage? Right? This is why a big part of my work after years in the manifesting space, it's no. This is the real thing that you need to do. Because if you don't do this work, you come back to this point after you've made all the millions of dollars and you're back in the golden cage, and now you're trying to manifest happiness or bliss. So why don't we just first find happiness or bliss before all of this, and then skip the whole point of needing to go down this golden cage route, and now you actually have fulfillment. And the funny thing is the money kind of flows when you start doing that work. Things start to align because people feel you better when you're really in that state of bliss. So yes, we could speak about the manifesting thing. A big part of me has honestly just moved on from that because, and this is my gripe with the manifesting world, it is reaffirming the very thing that people are trying to run from by trying to give them tools to change their life versus saying, hey, why can't you actually be? And when you're manifesting, you're doing a lot of things. I want to be. So when I did my work, and this came through psychedelics, when I went through Bufo and deep plant medicine journeys, and I've had many of them, you start to connect into your waveform. You start to connect into your being beyond the physical realm. And when I had my first experience through psychedelics, the thing that stopped me from being was the sexual abuse I was going through. The thing that stopped me from being was the traumas I had with my father and my mother. So until I went to deal with that, I could never rest, and no money could make that. So yes, you're always manifesting, but you're a hamster on a hamster wheel. When are you going to come to rest and become a human being instead of being a human doing? My job and my goal is to get to a point where I'm a human being and I can enjoy my fucking life. Whether or not there's the cash, I can enjoy my fucking life. And I think people miss this point because until you get there, nothing is going to give you rest. And I get to a point where I have entrepreneur friends, some super rich ones. There's no rest. They're not even they're not fun to be around. There's no joy around. It's just this weird tension, locked up energy. Their bodies are locked, sexual energies are locked, physical bodies locked, emotional bodies locked. Everything is all contracted. You can't really enjoy life from a state of contraction. I want openness. So the conversation of manifesting, yes, it's a tool and it helped me. But man, the real difference actually goes into when you go from being contracted to opening yourself, you change your fuel source, change the thing that's driving you. Now life comes to you and you can trust fall into life. Instead of being in this state of controlling it every single day, journaling and creating some life that you want and not really being able to go, hey, I feel where I am right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think maybe I didn't use the word manifesting, but I feel like I've kind of seen proof of that throughout my life, and it sounds like you have too. And yeah, quick question: do you think? Because I haven't seen this happen yet, where somebody who has that that goal that's not aligned with them, not aligned to, like, let's say, "Oh, I want to be rich, or I want to, I want a boat, or whatever it is, right? Is it possible for that person to realize it without actually obtaining it? Because I personally haven't seen anyone like that. Like they actually had to get there first to realize. So, and if so, like, how do you do? How does one get out of that? Do you know what I
I
mean?
have met people like that. And you are right. This is why, and this is the case for men specifically. I really think this whole journey is quite different for men than it. There's a
I
different kind
agree,
of pressure,
because we
right?
want different
Providers,
things. We want.
we want different things. We want different levels of status. There are different kinds of signaling we need to share. And also the process of transformation is completely different for a man. This is why with Other Side, the work I do, it's all men, right? Because the process, the very process is for men. And when we're dealing with these kinds of men, the ones who have made the success, it's a lot easier to go on your transformation journey because you have less attachment into these things, right? I have met men who have gotten to that point. Typically, these are people who've gone through plant medicine, and there are a few steps into transformation. And I'll speak for men because that's really the focus point, right? Actually, no, we can speak about both. There are really a few points. One of them is money, where you need to achieve a certain thing with cash. But when you really start getting into psychedelics and plant medicine, you start to see a very different kind of connection. And you go from believing in the things that people tell you about the other side of the world into knowing. That shift from believing into knowing is a fundamental difference. This is why a lot of people are scared of psychedelics, because it's going to break their ego. So if I'm working with someone who they're on this path of the journey, psychedelics is one of the things I do. You need to crack through and get to that core being, that inner child we spoke of. Because once that starts to come out, you realize there's a lot more juice in that. When I was on my journey chasing money, in fact, this happened to me, was chasing money and success and blah, blah, blah. Had a job that was going to pay me like $600,000, $700,000 was the potential earning from my friend who hired me in that. Super excited for it. Had my plant medicine experience, could not muster the motivation to do that job, no matter the cash flow. My heart wanted something completely different. And I had to go follow my bliss. And my bliss took me to points of struggle. At a point, I had $500 in my account. It's like, no, you keep going. And then things really bloomed up. And then I started working with these amazing clients and people all over the place, because you had to go through that fire, hero's journey. So there's a very different state of transition, and I've experienced that. And a lot of the men I work with, I don't think they would ever have gotten to this point to be able to go on their journey if they didn't to some degree achieve cash, right? Because when they get to that point, they have definitive proof. Some people are just super strong. Again, remember, I'm the weird guy who's been in spirituality since he was 7, really focused on this. It's a very different kind of thing. Whereas when I meet men who are, 20 million in the bank, super aggressive, super focused, they're not cracking through unless they've seen that and then they see the effect of it and they take that first step into something like psychedelics. That opens the question. Now, the answering of that question is a multi-year process. But on top of this, another way to bypass this and to really get into essence, because what we're speaking about here is how do you access your essence and your most powerful place without going through the cash thing first. Another core aspect of this is sexuality, right? Most of the tension in men are locked in their sexual energies and it can't flow through their body. And until you go to what's called a body deconditioning and a body de-armoring process, and you start to activate your sexual energies, which is through Tantra, man, you start having a very different wave of emotions through your body. And you start seeing that also change around the women you're with. That does something to your energy and your ability to be. Because most of the time you want all the money and everything you want, hoping that you would get recognition from the other side or from the other sex, right? When you get that and you realize you don't still get the attention from the other sex, a different question comes up. For men, when you learn how to open your sexuality and you can hold a space, there's something that happens where women feel you and they give themselves to you. And this is the same thing I was speaking about with the client of the internal feminine. Because once you learn how to hold space for the internal feminine, the world has safety around you. And then you realize you don't have to do as much anymore. Things start to happen while you be. So that's a bit of another bypass. And for me, I'll anchor in a second, the whole transformation really needs to go through all of these different layers. You need the psychedelics to crack. You need the sexual work to do certain things. You need body de-armoring and decondition exercises because it's a layer by layer process. And when people speak about manifesting and find your fulfillment and do that in a 3-month program, it pisses me off because I've been on that journey. It didn't fucking work, right? You need to do something else and they don't tell you that. And if you really want to come into essence, you skip the cash and you go into finding your bliss. And when you find your bliss, you realize that's the point you came here for. That's how your whole experience, man, I get to points where I just wake up and I'm in tears because there's just love and happiness coming through. I have days where I'm going to make the next $1 billion company, of course. I have that ambition. It's not going anywhere. But this heart apparatus, it started feeling life in a way that my push for my business, for the things I'm doing, no longer comes from needing to prove. It comes from doing the thing that I cannot not do. This is what I mean by changing your fuel source. Once you find that, you're in endless energy. You're just going.
I love what you said about like believing versus knowing. And I think you're right. Like something like a psychedelic experience or something like something physical, I think needs to happen for us to go from believing to like, because I heard Carl Jung say that when somebody asked him like, "Do you believe in God?" or something like that. He's like, and he goes, "No, I don't believe. I know."
Interesting.
Right, and that's like such a huge difference between just blind faith, believing versus actually like knowing. And yeah, I love that. And also, can you explain a
Have
little
you
bit
had
more?
psychedelic experience?
Yeah, I have.
Wonderful. Keep going.
Yeah, that's why I say I think you need something like that
Yes.
in order to go from believing to knowing. Like I can't just force myself to believe something I don't believe. You know what I mean?
Indeed.
Okay. Can you explain a little bit more about the opening sexuality? Like what does that mean by?
Man, that's huge. So it's such a thing that I wish. It's so scary for men to open their sexuality. This is not about open relationships, right? The idea really being have you seen the Scale of Consciousness by David Hawkins? I'm sure you have.
Yeah, I think I've heard of it, but I don't know
It
too
goes
much
all the
about
way
it.
from shame to enlightenment.
Oh
These are the different levels of frequency you can emit. And whichever way you believe about frequency, that's another thing. But if you look at that scale alone, right, say enlightenment is at 1,000 and shame is at 20. If you have shame in the space of enlightenment, it cuts your enlightenment by half, assuming you want to go on the hierarchical nature of it, right? You can look at it from a different perspective. The idea with sexual work, because sex is the energy that creates everything, we can't create anything without masculine and feminine. It's impossible, right? Everything in the world is a manifestation of sexual energy, third, fourth order derivative. Same thing with the agricultural industry, the governmental, so many things are all manifestations of sexual energy. And what we're doing here with sexual work, because I've touched on a couple of things, shame, sexual energy, and the different components. We're saying, first of all, what is the most powerful energy in the world? Sexual energy. Where is that energy typically stuck? In people's shame about their sexuality. This is why you have people going in and watching porn and learning about very weird things, but never being able to express it. So they have a lot of shame about the weird things that they want, they desire, they express. And it's such a guarded topic. So now you have your core life force being a guarded topic in your body and in your field. You can never really express your depths. And then you harbor shame and toxic shame around your core life force. Unless you unlock that shame, you can't have that energy as a man. You can't have that push, right? And when you unlock that, your soul and your body can't come into that state of rest and being, because there's some part of you somewhere that you're hiding. And this is why I love exposure work, because there's a part of you that you're hiding. The world has a barrier to your deepest core. When you start going into sexual work, and now we've introduced shame, right, which is the lock around it. What we are trying to do is liberate that shame around your sexuality, whatever that is, allow you rest in your core frequency of the things you want to do, the way you want to explore, how you want to flow, and really welcome that sexual energy in your body. Because A, that removes the shame, allows you to go up in frequency. B, remember now, there are different chakra systems, right? So there are different chakras in the body, if you want to believe that. The root chakra is the initial base energy, right? You can't have as much life force flowing through your body unless that root chakra is fully open, which is connected to your sexual energy. So you can't manifest or create or speak at the level and caliber and intensity that you can unless that energy is flowing through. I'll explain why. Your solar plexus chakra is your chakra of identity. Your throat chakra is your chakra of speaking. Your vision chakra is your third chakra, or your third eye chakra, if you want to go with these energy points. And a lot of people are trying to express something or connect with some vision of their life and speak some truth that is not really authentic because it's not sitting deep in their core identity once they've transmuted their sexual energies. Now, within this sexual work, and we're getting into some tantra, I'm throwing a lot at you here. What you're really doing when you go through body dearmoring and sexual opening, you open your Kundalini channel. I can speak about this because I feel it. Now, when I have sex with a person, my entire body vibrates energy. It's massive, right? And there are a few other principles we'll get into. As that energy starts to rise through your body, you have access to your primal life force. This is why you can't step into your being without sexual energy. When you have access to your primal life force, what happens? That energy rises to your solar plexus chakra. If you haven't done the inner child work, your identity is off. You're showing up as a fucking weird, different part of yourself that's shelled. When you've done that work and that's root chakra energy, that sexual life force hits that solar plexus because it's rising up, you're able to shine as your being. You are being, not doing, because you're working from the core. That's the energy that can now rise up through your throat and you start to express into the world. And now people look at you different and they go, there's something about your frequency. There's something about the visions you see is completely different because you've unlocked the core aspect of shame that most people hold. And also for a lot of men, until they've proven that they can get women, they can't rest. And you don't prove you can really get women because there's nothing to get. This is the other piece of tantric sexual practice. You learn this concept of no goals, where there is even no ejaculation in your sexual practice. And the inherent nature of having no ejaculation means there's nothing for you to get. There's only something for you to give. So now when you're working and connected with a woman or in that sexual zone, it's an experience of this other energy in front of you, which takes away the pressure, removes you getting anything, and it allows you to create safety in your own internal feminine. Now that energy starts to rise, and I fucking promise you, women smell this. And the energy of a woman rests in you in a very different way. Clients smell this. Your manifestation 10x's. Why? Because you're fucking being. We came into this world and learned how to do, and we lost our authenticity. And this whole path is really trying to identify what is your core frequency, because your job is to identify that and magnify that. The identification is the inner child work, the magnification is the sexual work, and the projection through the throat chakra. Now you're getting into a cycle. And again, we get back, and I'll land with a point of safety for a woman, is when you start to play with these energies and clear up yourself, because you have to go through a lot of shame to rest in your sexual, like to speak about my sexual abuse experience and different things, and to be, I had to go through levels and levels of shame. What comes out on the other side is a sense of peace that you feel in your body, where it's like, I don't need to prove in this room. And everybody feels that, because if everybody feels like they need to prove, we're interconnected beings. As soon as you're one of those people who needs to prove less or doesn't need to prove, everybody starts to galvanize around you. Now you're really tapping into a very different magnetic energy. And I don't know how far you've gone in this field. For me, it's not a thing I believe. It's a thing I fucking know, because I've seen the difference in my life, and literally things. It's from women, which is the mirror of the world. It's from clients. It's from investors. It's from partners. It's from employees. There's a restfulness where it's like, oh, I can connect with you.
Does this only affect men?
It does affect women also. It affects men more, in my opinion. And that's specifically because of, I'll explain in a second. So in Tantra, they have, and in tantric practices for sexuality, they say this thing that women are inherently tantric. So you can make a woman go tantric in 2 hours, and for a man, it takes 18 months. Because you have to take time to learn a new mechanism, a new pleasure mechanism.
Mm.
You're not just running for the orgasm and the contraction peak orgasm. You're learning to be present, right? You're learning to literally, when you're with a woman, just be with this woman. In the same way, when you're with a client, just be there, like with all of you. Women inherently have access to that because it's a more feminine aspect of things. So a woman can tap into that, and they naturally bring that. And women can call men into presence. For men, we have a lot more work to do, which is also why you see this conquer and conquest for men, right? It's an inherent need to create internal safety for the feminine. Once you start to create internal safety in your feminine by owning yourself, your conquer and conquest starts to go away, and you just start to have a sense of ownership in the room where you don't have to fight for your being.
I mean, I think as you're explaining all of this, I haven't heard this before, but like it makes sense to me, because I don't know if you heard that joke like from Chris Rock, that like everything that a man does is to get laid. Like
Yes.
if we can get laid in a box, we wouldn't buy a house. Like so I do think it affects men in a strong way. Like if a man had approached every woman that they were attracted to, like that's what they'll be doing all day, right? Like it's just, I feel like that's constantly on people's mind, and I think you're right. I think that's why people go on first date, and a lot of guys act creepy, or like women think guys are creepy because they probably have that shame, that second agenda, where they're portraying one thing to this person, but behind the scene they're thinking about something completely different, and that's going to come off as creepy.
And the women can feel that. They energetically feel that. And I've asked people this. They tell you, at one point when I went through some of my tantric processes, and I went through a process and I really met this internal shame, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to take this no goals thing, and I'm not going to have an agenda. And I started embodying it. I got a message from someone who says, your voice is different. It feels like it's inviting me in randomly. They feel this. So when I speak about energy, I really try not to talk about stuff that I've read in books, and really speak about what I've seen and felt in my body. And I know this from seeing, CEOs of $160 million companies and hearing about their journey. It's just that inherent thing of sexual energy. And as a man, your job is to own and learn how to really play with that, because it unlocks things. And for women are naturally connected. This is why people say, I was actually speaking to Johan Orb, another spiritual teacher, about this. And a woman is typically 10 years emotionally ahead of a man. Right? This is why women have higher EQ. There's just something about that.
I think way more than that.
Probably.
You know what?
Anyway, there's the whole thing on this.
I was going to ask you about that whole feminine, masculine energy thing. So from my experience, because I work with a lot of spiritual people in the spiritual space, when we do these like marketing messages and branding and things like that, it's much easier for us to, lack of a better word, sell this concept to women than it is for men. Like men are, I feel like more skeptical. They're more in their head, So they start like asking for proofs. Like I'm like that. They
Yeah.
start asking for proofs and like they want to like dig into the science and all of that. Whereas, I think women are much more open to accepting and just feel. I guess they're like you said, they're more in touch with their emotions. So can you talk a little bit about that, like the feminine, masculine energy, and what?
I have a what 400,000 person audience. 80% of my audience are women.
Hmm.
If I wanted to blow up my business and make $3 million a month, I don't know, $5 million, whatever it is, right? The best offer I can create is for women in my audience because they feel this, they resonate with this. The reason I chose to work with men was I realized that most men need this the most, but they don't have a space where they can really go into the work. Most men are crying for this, right? Most men want depth and intimacy, but when you look at the men's group and the men's people in this program, you see a bunch of weak men, and you're like, I don't want to fucking be around these people. Like, I'm a man who wants to make X million, buy my Lambos, and I don't want to be around this hippie guy talking about what's fucking spirituality. Man, leave me alone. Go play with your coconuts. I know that because I've also been in these circles. So there is a thing here where women are more emotionally adept and aware, and they can feel more. And because of that, when I say certain things and when we're speaking on a frequency basis on transformation and what it means to have a better life, women, they almost can intuit this better. It's the same thing if you look at the therapy visitors or the people who go to therapists. 80% are women, 20% are men. That gap is an unhealthy gap that tells me that a lot of men are untapped from their emotions. So the inherent need is men. It's just that the things and the current provisions, especially the people in this space, usually they're really women who are talking about spirituality. Men
Yeah,
don't feel safe
mostly.
there.
Yeah.
I tell you why. Let me actually even go deeper. What a man needs to go through his journey is extremely different from a woman. I attract a lot of women because when women come around me, they feel safe. If I've done my internal feminine work, they're like, oh my God, I finally have someone I can trust. So they outsource their feminine, and their trust to me is super simple. For a man to go through his healing journey, what needs to happen is he needs to come into a container where he can give up his masculinity, step into the feminine to heal and do the work, because the work has to be done in the feminine. He has to go into that primal raw release, let go of control. This is why if I'm working with a billionaire and I'm working with people who are really going into spirituality or plant medicine, the first thing they try to give you is a checklist. Does it have this? Is it this? Tell me about it. Give me 5. I have a friend. He's still waiting to do the medicine experience. Like, give me 5 books. I'm like, dude, I'm not fucking giving you any book. Because a big part of your healing is learning to surrender, because we're trying to introduce you and to show you how to surrender to life. There's a point here. 80% of the successors, we're noticing a trend with this 80%. 80% of the successful people you see have all gone through adversity. The very fuel source that drives them to success is adversity. It's just their response to the adversity. Because when they went through trauma, they were in their feminine, something happened, they made a decision, they got hurt, they made a decision to respond to that, they will never put themselves there. They made a series of decisions which are masculine decisions that form the masculine shell around the core feminine. Now they go into life proving to try to find that feminine safety, but they never can because it's all within them. So a big piece of what we are doing for men and why it's different, and I'll speak on the difference soon, or the how they relate, is that for a man to go through his healing process, the first thing he needs to do is to let go of control. But the thing that has gotten him to this point of success is control. So how do you manage the juxtaposition of these two core opposing concepts? Now you need a container for that man to be able to step in where he drops his masculine energy. So the first thing he needs is a place where, right, all of the men are at a similar level. If you have a group full of people, this is why we do Other Side the way we do it. If you have a group full of people and each one there's an exited founder or super successful MBA player who's done 20 to 30 million a piece or 20 to 250 million, and the baseline is 20 million, all of a sudden you look around and go, these are not weak individuals. These are people at this level. They're proven. And if these proven men are doing the work, then I can let go too. So the container of supporting men needs to be that strong, number one. And when the man comes in, he needs to be able to go deeply in his feminine, bring out a lot of shit, Be sure that that space is completely private. This is one of the biggest things at the other side. And when he leaves that container, say he's done psychedelics for 2 years or whatever, gone into his sexual shame. When he leaves that container, he needs to be assured that he can walk out with his masculine. And he can walk out with the same respect he came in, if not even more. If he doesn't have that, he doesn't go on his journey. So most men are super scared of that because they're inherently trying to protect the internal feminine in the same way they protect the women and the children and the people around them. This is a very similar mechanism. Whereas women, they show up in the world and they have this inherent trust for life. If a woman really wants to have a happy marriage, again, there are edge cases, and we can get into this another time. Oftentimes, though, there is this sense of, I'm going to go with this man. I'm going to make sure he can provide for me.
surrendering. Yeah.
If I have a child, I'm gone for a year. I really need to surrender. There's an inherent DNA element to them where they have to surrender. For the man, he can't do that. It's like, if I fuck up myself, I'm fucked, dude.
And I feel like that's something that men feel like throughout their whole life. I think almost all the guys that I talk to throughout their whole life, in the back of their head, they're thinking like, I need to make money. I need to, you know what I mean? Whereas in a lot of women don't think that way. They're not sitting there growing up going like, oh, I need to be rich and fly in a private jet. They're not thinking like that, right?
Unless they're from, anyway, maybe they're from LA.
Some of them are obviously, yeah. I think there's a lot of truth that and it also, I guess, it kind of applies to how the container that you're talking about, like that environment. It's kind of similar to like the environment that you were in college, right? How you got yourself out of that environment, and I think you're right. Like that, being in that environment is so important. Otherwise, if you're just around your friends who's wearing that mask and doing the same thing, trying to, I call it like the fake confidence, right? Like, because the real
Everybody
confidence
can smell
actually,
that.
yeah, exactly.
I think in many ways it's up to us to. I love the name of your podcast because it really calls into your biggest power, your authenticity. And I think anything that separates you from your authenticity is exactly what you need to work on. And the whole goal here in my own life, like I look through many things, my marketing, what I say in the world, the space for other side, whatever we're doing with men. And I have to go like, is this authentic? Is this true? Because the only thing that lasts is truth. The only thing that is good to be around is truth. Anything that's hidden causes issues. So I love the name of your podcast because for anyone listening, you do have to find that authenticity inside of you. And in terms of the healing work for men and the process for men, yes, make money. Yes, come on this podcast and learn the storytelling tactics and learn the different things from Sun. Learn how to brand yourself, be as successful as you can. But understand that the real juice of life comes beyond that. And you need to be bold enough to go deeper. And it's just like you and I having this conversation, also having that with my friends, where the way I am with my friends, I hold a certain standard and I want you to hold me to that standard. I'm going to call you out on your bullshit. You're going to get challenged. I'm going to ask you deeper questions. I have meetings with people and I would not work with you unless I can feel your heart. You can be the best employee or the best person that if I work with you, you open the door and you give me a $500 million fundraise or whatever it is, or an investor. If I'm not feeling your heart at this stage of my life, I am not interested in that. And that goes for my friends, that goes for my business, that goes for everything. If I'm not feeling that, then I know you have some stuff you have to work on, and I can't trust that right now. Because I've gone through my own journey, and I've been lucky that I've been able to surround myself with brilliant men who we can easily access that heart and hold our space for us outside of that. And when you combine that with authenticity and people who call you into authenticity, it's the greatest story you can tell, is the best money you can make, is the happiest you would ever be.
Yeah, I love that. I think I've been subconsciously doing that. Like, so I remember this one time I was sitting with like this corporate client, and very corporate, and we were doing the whole corporate thing, like putting up our wall.
26th pitch.
And then something came out of me, like they were showing me a design. I was like, oh my God, that looks like shit. And when I said that, like the whole entire room broke out in laughter, and that just killed all the wall. And from that point on, we were able to like authentically just talk to each other, like we're close friends. And I've because of that experience, I try to do that with every meeting that I go to. I try to like share my weaknesses, or I try to put my guard down first, and usually like that helps them open up too. And you're right. I feel like a lot of people actually, whenever that happens, they're so relieved, and it's like they've been waiting for that, because they've had a
Yes. I don't mean to interject you, but it's really like they've been waiting for that. It's like the world has been waiting for us to be authentic. I tell people to do this, and anyone should try this. Walk into a room and share the thing that you're most scared of sharing. See what it does to people. Try it once. Try it twice, maybe. The first time might be a bad egg. But just go in there and go, hey, I'm really scared of saying this right now, but this is the one thing I'm hiding, and I don't want to put up masks. This is my truth. And then meet them before you even say hi, or make it unawkward, whatever you want to do. See how that shifts your entire way of connecting.
I love that.
And you can do this in the most corporate settings, because what you are giving them is permission to be themselves, because you are yourself. And it's exactly what you said. It's almost like they're waiting for that. People go up, live their whole life with this rigidity, waiting for someone to be authentic so they can finally be authentic. And I'm telling people, if you have the balls to do it, you're going to find that the world finally looks at you and it's like, oh my God, I can just be around you. Yes, that's the point. That's the point.
I love it. I have just two last questions, and maybe they're related. So from that point to where you are now, was there something that happened that made you kind of want to focus on men and like helping men? And also, just in general in your life, is there some kind of myth that you used to believe, like, I thought the world was this way, but
I have to
throughout your
think
life
about the next one, because I still think about, have like 25 conspiracy theories which are unproven, but I get in there.
yeah,
I'm
like
joking.
some big life lesson that you learn where you thought the world to be this way, but it turns out, like, for me, the big one was what you just said, is I've always hidden myself. I've actually, I was the most, like, if I did this podcast 15 years ago, it would have been called Fake as Fuck, because I was the most fake person ever.
Mhm.
And I had to go through the moments where I was like, oh, actually, when I opened up, it's not the end of the world. It's actually, they actually respond. Like, I had to go through that change, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, the way I thought was completely different than the reality. So something like that, and also like um, something about like what made you want to help men. Is there something that happened in your personal life where
I love working with women also. A lot of my work has been with women. A lot of my followers are from women. But I realized that my frequency is one that can really hold a man. I'm not a, I have the aggression, I have the strength and all of that for men. And so many men hurt because no one can hold space for them. I can look at a man and go, hey, okay, great, you've made $20 million. What's the next thing? Let's talk about it. Like, stop fucking bullshitting me.
mm-hmm.
Right? So this has become more of a natural thing. And I really realized, I've also seen my father, that he's gone through his own life and someone needed to hold space for him. Why didn't anyone really hold that space? And I see how much rigidity men have. And I'm a man. I know this. Again, it's less belief than know. Women, when I'm working with women, there's a certain level I can get them. I have clients who pay me tens and tens of thousands of dollars, upwards of six, or going to six figures, of helping them get into deeper states of connection. Yes, we can do that. There's also a certain point that we get to where I'm like, now at this point, you need to work with a woman. And for me, the same thing with men. There's certain levels of healing and activation that only a man can give you. Make no mistake. Right? And also, naturally, there's stuff you need to do with a woman. So there was really no point specifically. There was a decision, right, where I just said, hey, what are we doing? What's the way we're going to change the world? I had a company that we drew up a path and said, how do we take it to 300K a month and 3 million a month? And how do we do all of that? And looked at all the numbers, and I realized I don't want to build a 100,000 person community. I don't want to do a Mind Valley. I'm not interested in that stuff. I want intimacy. I want connection. I want around the fireplace having deep connection. And the place I have that the most is when I'm surrounded by amazing men, and the conversation is just different, right? So I really went with my heart there and said, hey, what do you want to do right now? The only time I work with women these days are on one-on-ones, and I might do a once a year retreat for women to balance out the energy of business. Because I take that masculine, feminine concept of life and also put that in business. So you do a lot for men, and then you do one with women because that does something else for you. So yes, this is my frequency. This is what I can do. This is where I see the most need. And I think very few people are able to explain and help a man see past his logical constructs. I have a knack for just breaking right through that and having a real conversation. And I do this with, some really strong men. And I get
I
this
can totally
feeling
see.
of bliss in my body when I do it.
Yeah, when a man comes with that, especially like someone who's successful comes with that energy, you're absolutely right. You need another man to kind of to work with that. Like otherwise, I feel like he's just going to overpower the other person too easily, right?
It becomes a very strong challenge,
Yeah.
right? And this is also another thing. Working with men is the most challenging work because you have to be sharp. If you are not sharp, they'll call you out on your bullshit immediately. So there's a constant challenge where the man goes, oh, but what about this? Oh, but what about that? Oh, so you need to be laser point. A woman can be like, yeah, but it's cool. The man's always trying to protect his feminine, so he's always looking to run away. He's always checking for safety. And if he's with you and you're not sharp and the container is not set and there's a hole, he's going to get out of there. So it's so activating working with men, but it's the hardest thing you can do, in my opinion. This is why most people just have courses and they sell it to most women. They become millionaires, and it's
That's
like, oh, I changed many lives. And it's like you still have all the men on Wall Street doing the same shit they've been doing all the time. It's come on.
But you're right. At the same time, when you can have a group of men like that, like when I'm with like my closest friends, where we're very open with each other, you're right. There's nothing better than that because it's more special. I think because it's rare. Do you know what I mean? It's like you can't do that because a lot of them they don't feel like they can do that out in the world. But when we're here and when we're around the campfire bonding and doing that's so special because it's so rare amongst men.
Can I add a little point here? And this is in relation to other side, the work I do. It's intimate, first of all. I'd rather work with 10 men a year than 10,000. That's number one. The men are all super accomplished. Why? Oh, they probably have a very high chance of getting there because you need men at a certain level of alacrity to bond with each other. Nothing for them exists. It's also not just me taking them through the process. We connect with the masters of this spiritual plane. All the sexual kundalini stuff I talked about, plant medicine, psychedelics. Yes, I've done a lot of that stuff, but I connect with the top leading masters in the world and bring them into this container because those men need to learn from the best and they need that logical checkbox. And they need to quicken their journey also. So it's really introducing masters of the spiritual realm to masters of the masters of the physical realm to masters of the spiritual realm so that they can have this mergence and find bliss and have both. And that comes from intimacy. It comes from the container. So it's rare, and you have this with only a few men a year. It's extremely rare. Every person who joins other side has to go through a filtration process first. You can have $500,000, you're not getting into the community, even if you're a billionaire. You have to go through a specific process that sees if you're ready to transcend your ego or not. And there's a test. And that's an energetic physical test. And then you have the work with the masters. So it's essentially designed for that because that's what I need. I've been through many processes, and when one of those things were missing, I was like, guys, come on, I'm out. So that's that, and that's really to that point of rarity. And then on top of that, you have privacy, which is absolutely required. There's a whole private process where nothing leaks outside of the community and outside of the group. And with men, you need to do this work in a group. It's usually not a one-on-one. You can do a one-on-one, it kind of works, but doing it in a group with other people who you journey together, that actually accelerates your path a lot faster than just one-on-one. And that's kind of the principles behind Other Side and why it's the thing that I wanted in my own journey.
Yeah, I can totally see that. So what would be the one biggest common either myth that you believed that turned out to be false, or just when you see all these men out there, or you're just audience in general, what do you think is like the one myth that they believe that you wish they can see the truth?
It's very similar to your point. Your greatest power comes from just being and learning to be. Until you get to that point, you're playing around. And another thing here is your life really starts when you find that thing that you cannot not do. Those two pieces, man, opened up many levels of happiness and connection for me and just took away the stress of doing and getting that woman and getting that job and getting that success and getting this. Yes, you can just be. That's the biggest power you can have. That's definitely one of the core things that has changed my life. And yeah, you get to show up in the world that way.
Okay, I think we're out of time for now, but if somebody wants to find you, learn from you, work with you, can you kind of tell us what they should do? How do they find you?
The work I do with men is on the website Join Other Side. So join and Other Side. I'm sure it's going to be in the show notes.
Yep.
And my Instagram is Adeyemi Adeyosoye. I have a long last name. So that's Adeyemi, Adeyosoye. And it's just my name. And there's also a link to Other Side there, which is the community we do with these high caliber men. So if you're a high caliber man on that process, or you're accomplished looking for something more, that's kind of where to go.
I'll put all the links in the show notes and in the description. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being open, honest, and generous with your sharing. Thank you everyone for listening. I'll see you all next week, and cheers.